Thank you. Calling the Finance Committee meeting to order. Alderwoman Finlayson and Alderman Payon, council committee members are present and accounted for. First order of the meeting is to approve the agenda for the meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda as written.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. Next order of business on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our last meeting.
I would move approval of the minutes from our last meeting.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. All right, the first order of business on our agenda is development update from Planning and Zoning Director, Dr. Nash.
Mr. Chair, are we skipping the liquor license?
I'm in environmental matters. Never mind. Excuse me. Let me get back to Finance Committee. So the first order is a continuation of our discussion of the liquor license fees. We received some information from Director Dickinson about how much of a hit on our budget that would be if we forgave them. At our last meeting, we talked about forgiving, reducing, or delaying these fees. I also raised the specter of, if we're discussing these fees, why are we not discussing other fees, maybe all other fees? Excuse me, certainly other people are paying these fees. And of course, the relevant issue to this committee is, can we afford in a fiscal year where we have a tenuous balance situation at this point, can we afford to be forgiving anything? So with that as context, we have Stephen Rice here to help us think this through. But first of all, are there any comments from the committee members?
Mr. Chair, could we have Ms. Dickinson or Katie, and I'm sorry, forgive me, I can't remember your last name.
Connolly.
Connolly, could you give us a brief overview of the impact? It's not attached to our agenda, so the community has no idea about what we're speaking.
Yeah,
for all those thousands of people that are watching.
Maybe we could do a share screen of that, since it isn't an attachment. And welcome to the meeting, Alderwoman Tierney.
Oh, thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
So I don't know about sharing an attachment. I have an email here that has Cindy's summary on it. And when this first came up and I ran a report from our Munis system that showed how much we receive in liquor license fees a year, it's between $500,000 and $600,000. Now, some of those are the one-time licenses. And then what we had Cindy do was put together a schedule of regular alcoholic licenses based on the type of business. And she did it based on a year. She typically bills these in the spring, and they pay in the spring, or they can choose to pay in 2 payments and pay one in the spring and one in I think it's the fall. And her total was $467,000 for those type of licenses.
So, do you have a date that you sent that out?
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to forward you this email.
Okay. Well, I mean, I did get it.
Yeah, you got it, but this will be at the top of your email box then.
Take me the rest of the meeting to find it if I don't have approximate date.
All right. All right. You should be able to see that. Did I miss anybody? Stephen, do you want me to send this to you?
If we could send it to Julian, maybe we can put it on the screen so we could all just see it there.
All right.
Do a share screen.
Julian and Stephen. Who else? Anybody? So I hope the first batch got it. Katie, I'll send it to you as well.
Julian, so you don't have to worry.
Okay, yeah, I can include Julian on this last one too. Hopefully you can see the attachment.
Okay.
It hasn't come to me yet.
No, me neither.
Me either.
Why don't you refresh your mailbox or something? Did anybody else get it?
Not yet.
So I'm way out here in South County, so that might take a minute.
I think it,
I got it.
Okay.
Should be coming.
It FY20 liquor license fees. It's a Word document.
All right, I'll share it right now.
Yeah, this is Cindy's document, and it's based on 1 year's worth of billings. My numbers wouldn't match exactly because the timing of when we recognize it for financial purposes and when we bill it. But this is her list of what she would bill on an annual basis. So here you have the list in front of you. And these are the types of businesses. So depending on what the council was going to try to do to the liquor license fees, I don't know what idea it was reducing them, which ones it would apply to. But you have your restaurants, your clubs, your taverns there listed, and you can tell the impact from those amounts. We're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. So whatever action you would take to lower those revenues, we would have to find a place to trim on the expense side. And keep in mind that these upcoming billings are going to be recognized in the fiscal year 21. So this is going to be this current fiscal year would take the hit on the revenue side. So we would need to find 21 savings somewhere.
So perhaps this would be appropriate to hear from Mr. Rice about the pros and cons of any actions in regard to these fees, if that's okay with you, Stephen.
Sure. I guess I can, try to provide a little bit of, perspective. I just counted 110 restaurants that recently received grants from the county. The average grant size was probably about 20,000 from my review of the data. I don't know what the liquor license fee is per restaurant, but given the support that the restaurants have recently received, and not all restaurants have received grants from the county, I'm sure that the liquor license fees are not $20,000. And I guess what I'm saying is that I'm very sensitive to the plight of the restaurants. And, I know that Alderwoman Tierney's done some good analysis on this and talked to some people. But the restaurants have gotten some good support from the county and the state very recently. And, I don't have a formal recommendation here, but I know that the support that they have received and a lot of the work that we have done over the past year is much greater from an economic standpoint than any sort of rebate that they would get.
So I think that's probably enough said. I don't want to put you in an awkward situation of straddling constituencies, but I think it's a point well made. It's not as though there hasn't been help. Now, I would suspect no matter how much the grants are, it's not going to be enough to overcome the loss of patronage or even close to that. But we do have issues of our own in our own budget. Alderwoman Tierney, did you want to speak to any of this? You're the one that was approached and brought
Sure. Yeah, well, as we know, the climate
this issue and has carried the water on this, for which I'm appreciative, but certainly I would like to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all of you for discussing this again. I think that is what we owe them, at least, and I think they're grateful. The last correspondence I had with Anthony Clark was thanking us for this. He doesn't seem as I don't know what the word would be, urgent as he was 3 weeks ago, because the climate has changed. In fact, that their hours have expanded, and that they were waiting in anticipation for Governor Hogan's bill that passed just within the last 2 days. I'm not that smart on how that affects them specifically, but what I think is that this is good that we're discussing it, but number one, we have tried to optimize the use of their liquor licenses through these recovery zones. We have worked hard for them to survive, and I think they respect that and they know that. The other thing is that what I've told Anthony is that the city hasn't gotten specifically any sort of any sort of good response, financially to help us. So making it clear that whatever we do at this time, without getting any more COVID money, would come from the city. That didn't sit very well with him, I think, 3 weeks ago. And I know Ross and you helped me respond to that. But I just think that's my feeling, is that we haven't gotten the recovery, we haven't gotten the reimbursement. It would be a no-brainer if we had respective COVID money for this. But I think he does appreciate the fact that we're discussing this and looking at ways, so that's really where I'm at right now. Thank you.
So, Madam Finance Director, is it the case that these fees are being collected now, or are due now or sometime soon?
Yeah, so Cindy, I think she's getting ready to send out the bills. I think it was March they go out. The first payment is due within a couple months, and I can't tell you that precisely. And I know some of them can elect to pay it in installments and pay one into the following year. And so some of the annual revenue might get pushed and recognized in our FY22 year, depending on when it's collected.
I don't mean to interrupt, but could we make that really clear as far as having that installment option? I'm sure they may know, but just in case they don't.
So I can't speak to our policy on that. Cindy would have to clarify if it's anybody can send it into 2 installments, or if there's just some of them that can send into installments, and what the due dates are on those installments. She would have to tell you the particulars.
Well, that's really important if we're going to take any action. At least it's important to me.
Well, and I'm sure that she probably sends out their options for payment when she sends the bill.
So we could find that out, but I think what I'm hearing, the only thing that I had any warmth towards would be to delay when the bills were due, but it sounds to me like we're already going to have a problem of these payments coming in across fiscal years, which means that we may not realize the full $467,000 in fiscal 21. So we may have to be covering that revenue. But I think I might be wrong because Jody has her hand up.
So I will tell you that last spring, when the pandemic first hit, I believe there was a state action and we followed suit where we delayed the time when they had to pay the first installment. And it's usually due in the spring, and we collected them in July and August. But that is soon enough after year end that I accrue that revenue back into the previous fiscal year. So delaying that collection did not impact the revenue for FY20. It's the second installment that typically would fall into the FY22 timeframe, and I would not be able to accrue that back. So if more of those people that were billed paid in 2 installments and didn't pay the second installment until after August, it would push the revenue into the next year.
Right.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Of course. Thank you.
I assumed that when we collected the fees in the spring, as we've always done, that they were paying their fees forward for the coming year. But what I'm hearing is not that way, that when they pay their first installment in April or May, then it will accrue in the year in which it's paid.
Yes, so there's a difference between the year that the license covers, which would be selling alcohol from one date to another date in a year, and the period of time the period in which I can recognize the revenue in the financial statements, because the rules that govern when I can recognize the revenue are different than the time frame of the license.
So,
Okay.
If you delay payment, we will not lose any overall revenue, but it would impact a later fiscal year, and we wouldn't recognize it in 21, we would recognize it in 22 from a financial standpoint.
So how much in the 21 budget are we recognizing as fees for liquor licenses? How much of this $467,090 is attributable to the 21 budget, and how much for the 22 budget?
So the answer to that would depend on when these particular people are going to pay their liquor license fee. And you're going to have to, if you want to know what we've recognized so far, it would only include what we've collected in this fiscal year to date, which wouldn't be the bulk of these fees. So I can't see it in the system now. I just know when I checked earlier, the total amount of revenue that we recognized in 20 was $500-something thousand in liquor license fees, which included last spring's billings and many one-time fees, which are typically smaller amounts.
So let me ask this question of the committee members. Is there any inclination on the part of the committee to offer any change to the process as it exists? Alderman Payon.
I don't think we can do anything till we have all the information in front of us. I mean, I want to know what date, you know, these are dates, these are due. I would like to know, you know, more about the amounts. What is the rate that we charge? Obviously, it seems, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but it seems like different taverns or restaurants would be paying different amounts. I mean, I could definitely see postponing the amount due on the first payment, you know, maybe a month or something like that. But not based on the information we have.
when this screen went up with the numbers, I just divided out to get an idea of what the liquor restaurants were paying, for example, and divided the 79 into 313, which came up to a little less than $4,000 a liquor license, just an average. Right. Yes. And so that was one piece of information I got. And then I heard Mr. Rice say that our restaurants are getting maybe around $20,000 in CARES funding, which makes me think that they're not as destitute, even though, you know, they're not in a good place, but they have some monies coming in. I don't know how many of these restaurants pay over time and how many of them pay in one lump sum, which is going to impact whether it's the 21 budget or the 22 budget. I think this is pretty screwed up in that we have, and by no fault of staff, Jody, I see your eyes getting big. It's not about you guys.
I mean, what's screwed up?
Well, it is because we've got them, we approved fees and fines with the budget, but we've got a liquor license straddling 2 years. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, but that would be the case in any permit. If we had an annualized permit, the date the permit is valid for, the year would be different than our fiscal year. We don't necessarily need to line up annual permit fees with our fiscal year timeframe. I was just trying to help you understand the difference between what she's collected here and where you would see it in our fiscal years.
Well, I guess in my mind, it would make sense that the fees all did line up with our budget year. And how it's all over the place is just, I guess, history. So anyway, I'm not in a position to make any recommendation at this point because we don't know enough, just as Alderman Payon just said. As much as I think we would all like to help in some way, you know, this is all over the map. I don't know where to begin with offering any assistance.
So I'm Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 points of information just for background from this initial request. What one of the reasons that Anthony Clark specifically said he wanted us to look at this was that the county waived, the Anne Arundel County waived their fees. That's incorrect. That was confirmed from Kerry. The county is not waiving the liquor license fees. He was probably confused with them waiving the health department license fees, not the liquor fees. So I just wanted to let you know that. And the other points, just for background, without sounding subjective here, we have kept the fees constant since 2010. We have not raised these fees since 2010. I think that's important to know. And as you all know, it is complicated, Alderwoman Finlayson. I mean, it's 5 pages of fees that we have in the code for these establishments. So I'm kind of cautious about even averaging it to $4,000 because it really depends what they have, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess that's a fair number to use.
Well, we know it's not 4,000 because we have this schedule that's attached that shows that it's $20,800 for most restaurants. There are a couple that have a lower fee, $15,800.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you get $20,000 for most restaurants.
Whoa, wait. No, it isn't. I'm sorry.
Look at the schedule.
Mr. Chair, could you let us see the second page? I'm only looking at the first page.
So if you go to ID 3221 and you look at the Annapolis restaurant Gabstra, whatever that means, you can see what restaurants, I believe this is showing the fees that each restaurant is charged. Is that not that number?
Those might be the grants.
Those are the grants
those
they're
are
getting.
grants. Okay.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. I misunderstood
Just to give you a benchmark, if they were to have beer, wine, and liquor, it's $3,280 a year, and then it's, you know, sort of a la carte here. If they're open till 2 a.m., then they have to pay, you know, it can vary again to $800 to $1,000 more. So it looks, you know, it's hard to say what an average is. Probably $3,000, $3,500 for a restaurant, which would be Class B.
396709.
So committee, I think I'm hearing that there is not a desire to take any action at this point, but rather to postpone consideration. I actually am fine with not postponing and not considering doing anything, but I will accept a motion at this point to do whatever action is the will of the committee.
Then, Mr. Chair, I will move that we postpone any action on the alcohol beverage fees until.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for interrupting. Is it possible for me to ask a quick question before we close discussion on this issue?
You want to ask another?
Well, can I finish my motion?
No, but it's the motions to delay anything. I want to ask one question related to this.
Well, you can have discussion.
Yeah, finish the motion, please.
Finish, I interrupted.
That's okay. Until the next meeting is what I was going to say, to give staff an opportunity to answer some additional questions that we have. And I think Ms. Gaines, I don't know whether she's with us, should be as part of this discussion since she's handling our liquor licenses.
We were trying to get her on. We've been
Now I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
We were having
Now we can have discussion.
All right.
The discussion about closing the motion, or
No, discussion about the motion or whatever other point you would like to raise.
thank you. Ms. Dickinson, I just have a quick question regarding the fees. If a restaurant comes forward and they're like, we've been slammed by COVID, we weren't able to adjust to takeout or curbside, whatever. And if we have to pay these licenses this year, even if we do a partial payment, we cannot survive. Are we able to do like one-on-one exceptions for that? Or is it, this is the rule and I'm sorry?
So I don't know about that from a legal perspective. The Office of Law might want to comment on if that's favorable treatment, that kind of thing. So that's more of a legal question and whether or not we have the authority to do that. And that would be a policy decision. And I see the city manager was getting ready to unmute there.
Yeah, we would have to figure out a way to verify that because, you know, you open the door like that, and I hate to be pessimistic on requests like that, but you open the door to that, and everybody is then all of a sudden in that condition where they're going to fail next week if they don't get their liquor license way. So that just opens sort of that Pandora's box to everybody asking for that, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you. I'm sorry about being so random today. Fred knows why. Anyway.
TMI.
I know.
You're looking a little hungry there.
I'm fantasizing for my next meal. Sorry. Carrie, there's an email that Carrie sent me that I think is very important that I think I sent to you about 3 weeks ago, but it's important to know that CARE Act funding CARE Act funding could not cover, due to the restrictive nature of CARES Act funding eligibility, I would advise against the use of these payments to cover any money lost by the city in waiving liquor license fees. And I bring that up because that's important to know. So, you know, my thought was, you know, if we get respective funding, we in turn can help them. But if we can't use CARE funding, it would have to come from elsewhere. So it's just, that's a big deal. I'll send you all that email where Carrie went through the legalities of using CARE Act funding.
So this, we have a motion to postpone any action pending additional information from the administration. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to postpone, please indicate by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. I think that takes care of this order of business. City Manager Gerald?
I would just ask to make sure that we know exactly what information
what
has
you
been
want.
requested.
Yeah, I don't know.
Give us a list of information you're looking for so that either I or Cindy can put that together.
I think Fred was asking for the birth date of all of the restaurant owners.
I think I would like to see how many restaurant owners traditionally pay in the year in which they're requesting their renewal, and how many pay over time, and what the impact of those two groups would be. And what would happen, what would the impact be if we put everyone on a payment plan? Instead of, we don't make the request, I guess it's their decision as to whether to pay over time. But what if we gave every restaurant owner the option of paying over time? What would the impact of that be on the 21 and 22 budgets? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when you're talking about paying over time, you're talking about 2 payments, not monthly or anything like that.
Okay, I didn't know how many, so they pay.
No, there's only 2. There's an option to pay half up front and half later, I believe.
Okay. Well, I guess, and I hate to add another level, but suppose we gave them 4 payments instead of 2. Would that have a significant impact?
I'd have to analyze that for you to see what year it would fall into. This action would only serve to push 21 revenue into 22. That would be the impact on the finances. I don't know if that's a big help for them or not. I also wanted to add this action that the Finance Committee's taken. Will it have to be in the form of a resolution from a legal perspective? Because there's really no legislation on the table. So that would be the next step if
resolution
decided to recommend something.
That's also where I was going. I mean, this is an internal policy. This isn't something that's in code, right? This payment schedule. This is actually bordering on another piece of legislation that is of interest, but I mean, I'm hoping, maybe I'm feeling jaunty because I've had my first inoculation, but I'm hoping that this is a transitory issue, and I hate to get into changing long-term policies for something that I fervently hope will be a horrible but past memory come the fall, and we're in another fiscal year.
Well, Mr. Chair, my idea, I would not want to push this out any further than the 22 fiscal year. So anything that would move into another year beyond 22 is not what I'm interested in. I'm just thinking that if we give restaurant owners and others an opportunity to pay over a longer period of time, it will get them and the city beyond this pandemic, and hopefully be back to an area or a time of, I don't think we'll ever get back to the normal, but to a new normal that's strengthening everyone. So I just like to see what the options are and the impact of those options.
If I turn to you, Brooks, Fred, I think you were asking for a different piece of information. I think if we're going to postpone for want of more information, I agree we should be clear what information we need before we can take any further action. I thought you were asking something more along the dates that these payments were being made by each of the restaurants?
Yeah, there's, isn't there a single date that they all have to pay by? Or is there a single date? Or do they all have different dates on which they pay?
I mean,
Jody, do you know the answer to that? Ms. Dickinson?
I don't know the answer for certain. I believe there is one date in the spring that they are supposed to remit their payment by, because last year we made the point of delaying that date till July, I think it was July 31st that they were to pay by, instead of the spring date. But that's just going based on my discussions with Cindy last year when we were deciding to postpone the payment.
Okay.
so Alderman Schondemeyer had his hand up, and then Alderwoman Tierney. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one note on leaving this entirely up to the administration, something we may need to be cognizant of, and why this might require a little more council intervention, is because our mayor is a restaurant owner, and I know he wants to avoid any conflict of interest. I don't quite know what the legality of things around this are, but that's just why we might have to be a little more involved in this process. So I just wanted to put that forward.
okay, thank you for that. Alderwoman Tierney?
Yeah, I just, could we have more clarity, and perhaps that's Cindy Gaines on, I'm not really clear on what they know now as far as how they can pay. And if there is an option to split the payment now, we can at least work off of that. I'm just missing here what our present policy is, or if it is a policy. I know that I referred to the Crabble report as far as a recommendation that they can split the payment, but I don't know if that's the case.
So let me, before we get into that, Takia, you have your hand up. Juicy means we're in trouble.
No, we're having technical difficulties getting Cindy on, but she did call to answer the dates question. They can pay by, if they do it bifurcated, they can pay by April 1st or August 30th. Those are the two dates.
All right, so I think that we have a motion on the floor to postpone information. We've had some...
You've already voted on it.
Right, additional discussion about what that information is, and I think that when this comes back for finance, it's imperative that we have Ms. Gaines in the conversation, so she can answer some of these specific questions. I don't know, Madam Finance Director, whether we've given you a full sense of what information. I don't know whether that's really information requests that really go to Ms. Gaines, but I presume we can sort that all out between now and the next Finance Committee meeting.
Right. I will work with Cindy to figure out how many people typically do bifurcated and what that schedule would be on a normal year. And if they pay their second installment in August, we would probably accrue that back into the year anyways. But if we push it into the fall, then I'd have to wait for the following year. So that we could just lay out what the typical pattern is of payment. And you could take a look at that information and decide what you want to do, if anything. And Cindy you'd want to have her on the next meeting, because there's a lot of particulars about how they bill and how they're paid that I'm not your authoritative source on that.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no further discussion, the next item on our agenda is the Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation information. It seems to be a separate ID. Can somebody tell me what this particular item is about? I guess this goes to you, Mr. Rice.
I'm not familiar with the agenda item. I'm sorry.
Nor am I. I think this was just an attachment that gave us some additional information about the grant monies that the restaurants got. So I think that that was probably meant to be parcel of the whole discussion of the restaurant fees. At this point, oh, no.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Can we hear, Takia was going to give us a point of information.
Yeah, sorry.
At the last meeting, Alderwoman Finlayson wanted to know the specific restaurants that received the grant. So Hope put together the list for her. So that's why this is back on.
Okay. So
and that was going to be my question. So this is a listing of all of the grants that have been received from the county for our restaurants. That's the question. Yes.
I believe you're looking at the same spreadsheet that I have, so I would say yes.
Okay.
all right. Is there any discussion of this?
I don't even see it on in my inbox.
It's an attachment to the agenda.
So there are probably, let's see here. I don't have the attachment, but
Me neither.
I think it's the same information that I'm pretty sure it's the same information that Hope put together.
It's a list of restaurants and businesses, and those $20,800 grants. Some of them are $15,800 that the county gave to the business.
Okay, yeah, then that's correct.
Okay.
And I have I have also some additional information. I'm not sure if you have a tab, but I have a list of the carry-out restaurants that we put on our website and whether or not they receive grants as well.
All right.
I don't have any of that.
Well, Fred, it's on the agenda. It's under committee discussions. It's ID 3221. And there's an attachment on that item on the agenda.
Nope. I'm looking at what I got last Friday from Takia, and it's
I'll send
okay.
it. I'll send it.
not there.
All right. At this point, we're in the general discussion portion of the agenda. Often this is the time that the finance director gives us an update.
Got it. Sorry.
Thank you. Is there anything we need to discuss at this time, Madam Finance Director? I'll get to you, Brooks.
Are you ready? Do you want me to just give you an update of what we've been doing in finance, or you want to talk about other topics here? I thought there was something else.
Before we do that, let's see what Alderman Schneidermeyer want. You raised your hand.
Water bills.
Water bills.
The thing I've been emailing everybody.
I'm not paying your water bill again. I'm sorry.
I just want to say, while I have been working with the law office to potentially reintroduce the moratorium, Jody and I have been emailing as well, and I believe we found a decent compromise that may not require legislation to push the shutoff date from 2 weeks past due to 6 weeks. Is that correct?
So when a party first gets their bill, they have a month to pay, and then after that month we send a second notice, and after the second notice we wait a month until turnoff. So they have 2 months from the time the initial bill goes out. But we were talking about just pushing back the shutoff date to give them more time to respond to the notice. And I believe, and I haven't had detailed discussions with my staff yet, that we could push that back just by policy decisions. Because even now, when we have problems with a holiday falling on an inconvenient shutoff date, and we don't want to cut people off on a Friday afternoon and have the weekend where everybody has no water, we do that often where we push the shutoff date to the next week so that we can avoid that type of problem. So it's my opinion that we can change the shutoff dates and push them forward a bit, because as you said, the problem is now not necessarily financial, because we hope we have programs in place to help people that have been impacted by COVID. But the problem is the mail. I don't know what's going on with the post office, but we've been having, even we have problems of getting things and paying our checks out and getting them to the vendors timely, that kind of thing. So I don't know what's happening and how it's going to be resolved and when it's going to be resolved, but the mail is most of the problem here. The mail's not getting delivered.
That's been most of the complaints I've received from my constituents as well. Just mail is delivering things late. So I think that is a sufficient answer.
All right. Director Dickinson, is there anything we need to know and an update from the Finance Department?
So a couple of days ago, I thought somebody added something to the agenda. Weren't we going to add something to the agenda today? Did we forget? Yeah.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Yeah, that it was a request when I saw the recently the Senate bill on the hotel tax, and I was just sort of taken aback by it because of I didn't know if I wasn't aware, but the bill is before the state house in the wake of all of this financial stuff with the visitor center. So the bill stresses that, we need their accounting, blah, blah, blah. And as you all know, the Visitors Bureau gets 17%. Presently, the Anne Arundel County Arts gets 3%. But this bill allocates an additional 3% from our general fund to our city arts and public places. And so, number one, I don't know why. I love art, I understand, but I do know that we have increased their budget, and if I recollect, they haven't spent it. So I don't understand the reason for the increase. However, City Manager Jarrell did respond this morning saying that because if this bill passes, we would not then allocate any funding to them. We would just rely on this, and they would in turn get the 3%. I guess my frustration is, how does this stuff happen? Like, how come you read it in the paper and you're like, whoa, wait, what? And so I just didn't know if I was out of the loop and whose decision this was. And did we get a budget from AIPPC saying that they needed more money? It just seems unfortunate in the middle of a pandemic that we're allocating funds out of our general fund to arts. Any other time would be great. And the other thing is, if we bring this up again, why didn't we reevaluate why we're giving the Visitors Bureau 17%? I mean, isn't this the opportunity to reevaluate the whole picture? So I just thought it was just very, very troubling. So that I don't know if Jody knows any more about it than.
Is that me?
But, what's that? And just so I'm referring to Senate Bill 529, hotel tax alterations, distribution of revenue. This bill requires the City of Annapolis to allocate 3% of hotel tax revenues for the Annapolis Art and Public Places Commission. The City of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County are required to establish special funds for the distribution of hotel tax revenues to community organizations. The bill also establishes reporting requirements and oversight of the hotel tax revenues provided to these community organizations. The bill takes effect July 1st, 2021. So, I mean, the other reason for my angst is, in the middle of a pandemic and all of these community needs right now, why did we decide arts took priority? And there may be really valid reasons for that, but I just thought that as a council, we should have discussed it before this was proposed to the state delegation. So please correct me if I have some misunderstanding.
Whose correction are you seeking?
I don't know who.
Mr. Jarrell? I mean, is this something?
I guess it would be City Manager Jarrell or I think the mayor. The mayor.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond based on what I know about it. I don't think the mayor ever proposed this to the delegation. I think the delegation, after they proposed and after it was a drafted state bill, was asked to support it, which he did, because our delegation has been so supportive of the city. But yeah, and I would reckon, so what this equates to is about 76,000. I was a bit surprised because there's been talk of using some of the hotel tax for other purposes, which I think you're aware of, the resiliency concept. So I was a bit surprised to see this in light of that, because I thought that if a piece was going to be taken of the hotel tax, it was going to be for that purpose. So I don't know why this was proposed. That's beyond my pay grade, clearly, about why this was put forward. But I would recommend that if this is passed, that we not do the separate grant that we have in the past. That's been $40,000. So we not do that. And in lieu of that, they get the roughly 76,000 that this bill would provide.
But I would recommend, if they're going to add this burden, that they pay us a goddamn pilot. I mean, I'm a little upset that they're cavalierly expending our funds but not giving us anything. So,
well, they are working on that. That was the governor that proposed the reduced amount again.
That's Hogan.
So that they are trying to get that restored. They got it restored last year, but then the governor reduced it again because with the COVID reductions that they did in the spring. So they are working on that.
Yeah, I just have to reiterate that I think this is a really bad example of the lack of transparency, and that we as a council don't know that this went before the state delegation in the middle of a pandemic where funds are really, really, needed for all sorts of reasons. So that's all.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yeah, this feels like a bigger problem in that 2 years in a row now, our delegation has taken an action without the city being aware. Last year, the reduction of the pilot by 40,000 for that study. And now this year, funding for art in public places, which we all support, absolutely. What I think is missing is a conversation. We appreciate what our delegation does for us. We would just like to know what their plans are for us. And I think it's not too much to ask to have a discussion with the mayor and the city manager and the full council, if necessary, before legislation is proposed. So we don't have to read about it in the newspaper, but that we're truly all on the same page with what we're requesting. So if we could ask that there be transparency and collaboration.
I think I would slightly rephrase your statement. There may well have been a conversation with the mayor, but it's clear there wasn't a conversation with the council. And so I guess what I would like to find out is, was this something the mayor was aware of and just forgot to tell the rest of us, or what? Because the delegation may fully believe that we're the policymakers are well aware of all of this, when in fact clearly we're not. So I do believe there's a communication gap. I'm just not sure where that gap is occurring.
Well, I just heard City Manager Gerald say that he wasn't aware. So that speaks volumes. So you don't have to, I meant what I meant,
Yep.
So thank you.
Alderman Payon, you had your hand up?
I did, but you just covered it. So
all right.
I'm not sure the fault lies with the delegation. If I were the delegation, I got a choice between contacting 8 councilmen or the mayor, and assuming that it would get to the council, and they did what I would have done, I think, and talked to the mayor.
Let me repeat, this is the second time. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
I'm just so.
Director Dickinson?
I wanted to clarify that the fiscal impact was analyzed for the state legislation, and that was the first I had heard about it. And the 76,000 is based on the last full year of occupancy tax collections, which was FY19. And since FY19, the county changed its law, if you recall, that now instead of short-term rentals with 3 or more rooms collecting the occupancy tax, now any short-term rental has to pay regardless of the number of rooms. So we, in a fully robust economic situation, will have an increase to our hotel occupancy taxes in future years beyond FY19. So I would assume that that number 76,000 is a very conservative number, and that in 20, if there had been full occupancy, we would have seen an increase. And in 21, and we're still getting the short-term rental monitoring contract up and running. And once that's fully running, we'll have more compliance with the law. So I just want to reiterate, 76,000 is a very conservative amount.
So before I turn to you, Alderwoman Tierney, there's 2 issues in my mind. One is this possible, I'm not going to make an accusation, possible communication gap. And I think we need to find out where that gap occurred. And I think, Mr. Gerald, you are our best agent for that. Did the delegation not consult us and dip into our budget to increase this expenditure? But I think the bigger point is, as City Manager Gerald pointed out a few minutes ago, we have visions of using these funds for the financial authority, the resilience authority. Alderman Dewan is thinking of this money to help finance affordable housing. This fund is not that big, and it does seem that allocations of this fund are very much a policy issue that should be fully debated in front of the council, brought before the Finance Committee, be part of the budget deliberations. And I don't think that the state delegation should be dipping in to our financial allegation, even if their intentions are great. We need to be aware of these things and keep track of these things, because we have some budget constraints right now. We are in the current year of barely balanced, if we end up balanced, and we have a prospective another year where every dollar is going to count, and that we need to be in control of that, not the delegation. So I agree with Alderwoman Tierney. This is something we need to explore and find out what the heck is going on, and make sure that we don't have some missing links in the process and in the communication. Jody.
So I wanted to say that you were referring to it as a fund. These are general fund revenues that are currently being used to pay general fund expenses. If we pull them and have to use them for some other purpose, we need to either reduce another expense or find another revenue to replace it.
Right. So we allocated money in this current budget to arts and public places. There is a tap on the general fund for arts and public places. That tap is much more money than we've been allocating over the past several years. It is the case that arts and public places hasn't expended all of the money that they were given. We are now allowing a carryover of some of those unexpended funds, but that is our purview as a council and a budget allocation, and not the purview of the delegation, unless they're going to institute martial law and take over running of the city budget. So I find this to be an unwelcome legislation. But before I take issue with the delegation, we better make sure that this was their initiative and not an initiative coming from within the city. And if so, that needs to get sorted out. But these funds, particularly as we start having more legislation regarding short-term rentals, may be getting smaller, not greater. And the draws on this, I think, are overly ambitious for the amount of funds that are available. And we have to sort out how they're going to be used. Are they going to be used to finance borrowing by the Resiliency Authority? That's fine. Are they going to be used to finance monies to help provide for affordable housing? That's fine too, but all of that needs to be discussed and adjudicated by the council. Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. But one thing I wanted to reiterate that Director Dickinson said is that in light of the pandemic, because of the new county law on hotel tax, we should have more because, as she said before, it was limited to 3 rooms or more. Now anybody that does this lodging is subject to tax, and we smartly have a company to make sure that those monies are collected. But this is a big deal only because, yes, that bucket of money is going to increase, and we should decide what special funds. I understand from this legislation that we're required to establish special funds for the distribution of these hotel tax revenues. And I guess all we have is the AIPPC. But as you said, Alderman Arnett, Alderman Gay is looking at setting up a housing trust fund. I mean, this is a lost opportunity, and I'm fearful that this is going to pass, or did it pass? I don't even know. I mean, that's the frustration. We really need an autopsy of where we want these hotel tax funds to go, and where we can optimize affordable housing and stuff like that. As much as I love art. But enough said.
In an order of priority from my perspective, resiliency comes first. That keeps the water from our feet, amongst other things, and helps us recover from natural disasters and so forth. Housing would be a higher priority for me than more art in public places, particularly when they're not using the funds that we've been giving them. But I still am anxious to learn why the delegation thought to dip into this. And I guess with the committee's permission, I'd like City Manager Gerald to provide us with some history of this for our next Finance Committee meeting. And it could all be a mistake. It could be that people didn't understand. I don't know, but you're right that we find out about this in the paper is objectionable. But more importantly, it's objectionable that an outside body is allocating our funds for us, and I don't welcome that. I welcome input from them and guidance from them and support from them, but not reallocating our budget. So, is there any more discussion on this newly found agenda item? Is there any discussion from you, Jody? And I would limit it to really big ticket items that we need to know about, ongoing matters with the budget and things in the finance department. Like you found a deputy director or something like that.
I haven't made a choice on that yet. I have a couple of candidates that I could consider, and I'm still deciding if that's the level I want to fill it at with these people. Right. And then all I have to say is that we're working really hard on budget, and we're still working on the financial statement, the CAFR, and that should be out in a couple of weeks. We're hoping to get it out by the end of this month, but I'm not. I don't know if we're going to meet that deadline. We're already pushing up against the deadline, and the auditors are going to need more time for review, and it is a big document, so we might have to try to get another extension for that.
All right. Are there any questions from committee members or others? If not, thank you, committee and attending alderpersons and all staff. I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Mute.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.